Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Dude, I Love That. I'm Liv, and today we're continuing the Summer Throwback Enneagram series with Narnia. This one is going to be so much fun because obviously these are based on the C.S. Lewis books. And I say that because I'm talking about the movies in this one. I've never read the books, so I can't talk on that. But we're doing the movies, and it was just really cool to go back and watch these movies and actually look at the characters' types because, like I've said previously, when you're watching movies and TV shows, you don't necessarily think about types too much, but then when you watch it with that in mind, it totally changes things. And so it was just really fun to go and watch these movies and actually see these characters in action as their Enneagram type. And so we're going to jump in with the main characters of the Narnia series, at least movies 1 and 2, because I know that half of the siblings aren't even in the third one. So I was just like, we'll just forego that one. But anyway, let's start off with a character that I have actually a kind of controversial typing for. And I say that because I actually asked some friends, I was saying, I'm doing this series and I don't know, like people love Narnia. And I want to make sure that I like uphold that. Is there anything I should know? Like, do you have any thoughts? And we were going back and forth about what they thought these characters' types were. And one in particular, they're like, I don't think that's it. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I think this is it. And so that is Lucy. I think Lucy is a type 7. And apparently they're saying that the going thing is that she's a 9. Or I said maybe she's a 4 as well. And they're like, yeah, 9 and 4 get thrown around. And so I'm like, the more I watched, the more that I saw that I think she's really a 7. And really, to me, it was solidified when I saw that she is so good at positively reframing everything. And if you've listened to the podcast before, I talk a lot about how 7s are so good at positively reframing situations and they don't want to feel a bunch of emotions that aren't happy and positive. And so what they do is they take that and they turn it into like, well, what can we gather that's actually good from the situation? Or what lessons did we learn here? Or how could this be worse? Let's focus on that. And I feel like that's what Lucy does a lot of the time. And, she has a lot of energy. Yes, of course, she is younger. And so you're going to have more energy with kids. But there's something about her that's very sweet and youthful, but also very wise and mature. And so that's where I think the 7, remember, I talked about this in the Clueless episode as well with Cher. 7s have a connection to 5 in health. And so I think what we're seeing from her is she's able to use her head in a really interesting way. And she's gathering all this information. And yeah, she's feeling these happy emotions and she's loving it. And that's what I think could lead people to think that she's a 4. However, the difference is I don't think she sits in that melancholy state. We don't see that ever with her. And I also think she doesn't enjoy like the depths of emotions like a 4 does, because even though I don't want to buy into the whole caricature of them being these like melodramatic, oh, they're artists and blah, 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 there is something about a 4 where they do enjoy the depths. And I don't think we see that as much with Lucy. Now, I will say for her, I think she enjoys the mystery and the intrigue of the situation at large. And I think she enjoys being able to kind of have this separate life and know that there's more out there. And I think the adventure really fuels her. And so, again, that leans more towards a 7 for me than it does a 4 or a 9. And again, I really went against the 9 because I was like, she's not out there trying to make peace. She's not out there being like, I'll just be a team player and whatever. In fact, she's actually being more aggressive than I think you want to give her credit for, because she's the one that's like, no, I saw him. I know I did. When she's talking about Aslan in the second movie, she's like, I for sure saw him. And don't discredit what I'm saying just because I'm the youngest. And she's the one that's saying, we need to protect so and so, and we need to be there for this person, and we need to do this. And even though she's the youngest one, I think she's the most powerful of them all. And I would say that that does lean more towards 7s, even though they have this very sweet or fun or adventurous front. Deep down, they are people that, like, if they say something, you need to listen because they have this incredible view of situations and they have this power behind them that, again, it isn't aggressive like the 8 or a 3. Even though the 7 is in the aggressive stance with the 8 and the 3, the 7 has this sweetness about them that just carries it, and it doesn't come across the same way the 3 and the 8 do. And I really think that that's what's happening with Lucy here. And then a couple of other things that I wrote down when I was watching, she is so inspiring. And again, that's something that you see from the type 7. They're so good at, I believe Bob Goff is a type 7, and you see a lot of 7s in the motivational space. They're really those people that are so good at emboldening people and helping them get to where they want to be. And so that's what we see with her, even with like creatures that maybe are, quote, less than, or they're not like the humans, or they're not this, that, or the other. She still shows them so much care and compassion, and she treats them equally. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and this is why I actually gave her a six wing, in both of the movies, when people task her with things, when Santa gives her the knife, and when Aslan in the second movie is like, you're going to go do this and you're going to fight. And she's like, oh, I hope I'm brave enough. Both times she says that, and both times she's encouraged that, yes, you are brave. And even though I don't necessarily think that she doubts her being able to go through with it, I think that she doubts her ability to stay calm and go into it leading up to the event. Whereas I think she could actually do it when the time comes, but it's like thinking about that happening is what kind of gets her jumbled up. And so that's why I think she's like, okay, great. I hope I'll be brave enough, but I'm excited about it. And so that's where you're going to see that 7 wing 6 versus a 6 wing 7, or even a 7 wing 8. Oh, really quick, let me talk about her tri-type, because I thought it was really important for her. So again, she is a core type of a 7. However, I think that she has a 9 from the gut triad and a 2 from the heart triad in her tri-type. And if you've never heard me talk about tri-type, go check out my Instagram at Hey It's Liv James in my reels. It's a green background on the cover photo, and it's talking about how to find your tri-type and what tri-types are. So be sure and check it out over there. But again, I felt like it was important for her because there's this really interesting, complex thing with her that I feel like definitely leans more towards needing the tri-type in order to explain everything that's going on. And she really does have the sweetness of a 2, and she has the gentle spirit of a 9. And the reason that I chose a 2 over a 4 in the heart triad for her tri-type is simply because I think she cares so deeply for others. And I think caring for others is more her motivation than with the 4, where they're looking for sort of the beauty in life. And that's more of their motivation. And so, not that 4s aren't helpful. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying the 2, that's what they do everything from. Whereas the 4, they have a different motivation. So, even though 4s are empathetic and helpful, that's not their primary mode of operation, if that makes sense. And so, again, I think she's a core type of a 7 with a 9 and a 2 in her tri type. Oh my gosh, let's talk about Susan. I think Susan's so interesting because pretty quickly I was like, okay, she's either a 1 or she's a 5. And I definitely felt like by the end of it, I'm like, no, 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 no. She's a 5. And the scene for me that was like, oh, 100% is when in the first movie, they're trying to cross the river. And Peter's kind of like, let's just go. And she's like, no, wait, we need to think about this. And then he calls her out for trying to just be smart instead of doing what they need to do. And so that's where I was like, yeah, she does call people to be sensible. She is trying to be a role model. She's trying to be level headed, and she encourages level headedness in others. And she doesn't like when people get all riled up. She's like, okay, calm down, chill out. Let's look at this logically. And so, again, that leans more towards a 5 for me than a 1, because remember, 1s are in the gut triad. And so, if they feel something, they're going to go for it. Whereas I think she's a lot more thoughtful before she does things. And I think she really is trying to look at the best case scenario and go in that direction. And if that takes her a couple more minutes of just thinking about it, she'd rather do that than act from her gut and then potentially do something that isn't as fruitful. And again, that's where I really do think she's more of a 5 than a 1. However, I think she has a 1 in her tri type, and we'll get to that in a minute. But some things that I wrote down for Susan that really just were like, yes, 100% a 5. She is very responsible. And again, I think people normally are like, oh, if they're responsible, they're a 1 or they're a 6. But I'm telling you, the type 5 is very responsible and reliable. And I want to highlight that for you guys because I feel like people always overlook it. And it's like, no, you can always count on a 5. They're so steady and stable, and they're really going to be there for you. Also, I really love the fact that Susan has this quiet bravery, and she's very courageous, and she doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's just sort of like, this is what we're doing. And she doesn't need people to hype her up. She doesn't need anything. She's just like, no, this makes sense, and I'm going to do it because I've thought it out, and this is what needs to happen. And so there's something about her because remember, the 5 has a connection to 8 and 7. The 5 goes to 7 in stress and 8 in health. And I think a lot of times, especially because she kind of is like the mother figure in the family as of these movies because they've been sent away, she's assumed that role, and she takes a lot of pride in that because she wants to make sure that she's doing the best she can for others. And so she's looking at it and going, I'm going to pull from that 8, and that's what I'm going to use to protect my siblings and to help them grow into the people they need to be. And so if that means making sure that they're making smart decisions and that they're protected, that's what I'm going to do. And I really do think that she's kind of the instructor of the group. I think she's the one that's trying to not only be a good example, but set a good example by kind of leading and directing people. And well, maybe not even leading, I would say guiding. I think she's a guiding force in their lives because she's like, I know that you can do it, but I think you need a little bit of like maybe a boundary, or you need to just kind of do it a little bit differently and then it'll be perfect. And so that's where I think we see that 5. Again, I always talk about how 5s think in chess moves and they see life more as like a chessboard of like, okay, if I go here, what's going to happen here? And am I going to get trapped? And so they're always doing that and they're always making their decisions from that lens. And then, like I said previously, I think that she has a 1 in her tritype, and that's where we're getting a little bit more of the responsibility and her wanting to really, again, be that good role model. And she really is somebody that is trying to set good examples and hold herself to a high standard so that she can also call others up to be held by high standards because she knows they have it in them. And so that's where we see that. And then from the heart triad, I think that she has a 3 because a lot of her feels like she wants to exemplify what she believes is the best and right thing to do. And that 3 is always what, especially when they're healthy, they're trying to be that for people. They want to inspire that in others and they want to be the person that others can come to lean on. And they want to be the one that shows people that you can do it. Look, I've done it. I believe you can do it too. And so that's where I think we have that from her. Oh my gosh. Can we talk really quickly about about Edmund? I was warned. I was like, again, talking to my friends about Narnia and like, what are some things that I should hit on that you think are important? And they're like, make sure you mention how Edmund grows in the series. And I was like, yes, of course. Like, no one's just stagnant their whole life. Like they have a story and they have this growth path. And so for him in that first movie, not looking too hot. He's got like the villain of the siblings, if that makes sense. And so I was like, oh, this is really interesting. But I think there's some really fun stuff to pull out for his character in that first movie. So I want to hit on that, but I promise this is not going to be like dragging this type through the mud. Okay. I think there is something really cool when we see in the second movie, we see a lot of this growth and we see him really starting to use the powers of this type for good. And so let's talk about it really fast. And if you're a 2, spoiler alert, he's a 2, please do not get offended. We have to talk about the full range of every single type, okay? No type's perfect. Even though you always want to be your best self, sometimes we just have struggles. And so every type has it. Every type has their shadow sides. If you want to know more about shadows, Krista has great info on that. Check it out at enneagramandmarriage.com. But still, we're going to hit on some things that aren't quite the best today. But like I said, there's some great things at the end that we see him grow into this amazing young man. So why I decided to type him as a 2, and I think he's a 2 3. In the beginning of the movie, you can see that there's this tension between him and Peter because he kind of feels like, I want to be taken seriously. I want in. And Peter's like, like, you're my little brother. You're not going to be in the same range as I am. And so I think he takes it very personally. And remember, the passion of the 2 is pride. And so I think for Edmund, he kind of sees himself as more grown up. I think he sees himself as like going through more than he has and having more expertise than he does. And so I think for him, he's coming from that perspective when he does anything. And Peter's always like, but you're not. Like, you need to chill out. And so he gets really upset about that because he feels like that's an attack on him. And it's like, but it's not. Like, you're a kid. Enjoy being a kid. And I think he's trying to like shove himself out of that phase as fast as he can. He definitely wants to be seen as more interesting and more funny than other people. He's always kind of comparing himself to others. And that's something that when the 2 is in lower levels of health, that's what you tend to do. And I think it's not even just the 2. Honestly, it's so many types because we're in a world where it's very easy to be like, well, they have what I don't have, or I'm better at them than this. And so you kind of start doing that comparison game. But it does get him into trouble later on. The other funny thing, I see him copying Peter a lot in the beginning of the movie where he's kind of like, oh, Peter's doing this, so haha, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon. And then it doesn't work out for him. And then he gets frustrated. The 2 is really interesting when it comes to merging. And typically we talk about merging and 9s, but I actually think 2s do it a lot as well because they see what's being well received. And so they kind of adopt some of those similar traits in order to have this thing go the exact same way for them. However, it really does come down to personality. Maybe it's working for that person because that's truly who they are, whereas you're trying to riff off of it and it's not working for you because that's not truly who you are. So, again, another great lesson in being true to yourself. However, let's dive into a little bit more here. So, we see him saying in the first movie when he's talking to the White Witch and she's asking him about his siblings, he's like, "Oh, they're nothing special." And sometimes when that too is in lower levels of health, they can be very melodramatic and they tend to choose emotions based on what they think will elicit a response. And so he's picking up that the witch is wanting something unique and special and different. And so that's where he says, well, they're nothing special, implying that he is. And so he feels like he keeps being thrown by the wayside and ditched by his siblings. And so he's like, I think I can find myself important in her eyes and that she will take a liking to me. And so that's where he's choosing what he says and he's underplaying their role in his life in order to up his role in her life. Hopefully that's making sense. But the next thing is that he is really quick to buy into attention and affection from others because remember, the two wants that love. They want the connection with people. They are very people oriented. And if they feel like they're not having that or that they did have it and now it's like not quite being reciprocated as what's happening with his siblings, they're going to look for it in other people. And so that can lead to things that aren't the greatest, like him buying into the affection the witch is giving him. Now, obviously, she seems to be very flip floppy. She's very intense and melodramatic. And I think he's not really picking up on that right away because he's like, she's giving me gifts and she's being nice to me and taking an interest in me. She must have my best interest in mind. And then, of course, we find out that she's playing him. And that's where, again, in lower levels of health, the two wanting to have that connection can end up buying into things too easily because they don't want to look at the red flags because they're like, no, but it's connection and I want connection with people, which is all well and good. However, in this situation, you can see where it can get you into trouble. So, a couple of other things. He lies and gets defensive when people question him or when he realizes, oh, this isn't good. He quickly tries to like backpedal out of it. And that's where the two, remember, they go to a type 8 in stress. And so the 8 is part of the reactive triad. And so what you're going to see is when they take on the lower levels of 8, they start to get very reactive and kind of blustery. And what they do is they're like, oh, well, that wasn't me. And they start kind of blaming, or they can start trying to just straight up lie and be like, no, that didn't happen, which inevitably get you into even deeper hot water because it's like now you've created this whole web. And so that's what we see him do when it comes to Lucy and the wardrobe. Now, what I love so much about the second movie is obviously the White Witch is defeated in the first one, but she comes back in the second one. And originally, he was the one that really whipped everything up with the White Witch, right? He was the one that invited her into their lives. But in the second movie, when Caspian and Peter are being lulled by the White Witch, he was the one that defeated her. And that's what I love so much, to see that growth for him, because initially he's very easily buying into these things. And I think had he not grown as much as he did, he would have been the first one to like go grab her out. Now we see that his brother, who initially was a strong one, is being lulled in by this. And then Edmund is able to come up and be like, no, I know exactly where this gets you, and I'm not going to let you fall into that trap. And so the two, being the helper that they are and caring for others as deeply as they do, he's like, I know that you're in a sticky situation, so I'm going to come to the rescue and defeat her for you so that you don't end up in a bad way. And that's what I love about that healthy two. They're just the best. And also, what I love in the second movie is when he's trying to get Caspian's uncle to challenge Peter. And basically what he's doing is he's using his two powers of understanding what people need and being able to, and I don't use this word in a bad way, by the way, but being able to manipulate situations. He's using that for the greater good. Whereas in the first movie, we see him using it more in a self-serving way. He's using it to be like, no, this is what's best for everybody. And I know that I can get him to say yes. And again, he's leaning a little bit on that three wing there, being able to be convincing and that chameleon, but it works so well for this situation. And he's able to come to the rescue instead of last time, like when he was causing trouble. And so that's what I love to see. And speaking of Peter, I talked to the girls about this again, and I was like, wait, what do you think Peter is? And they said they were getting a lot of 8, 2, and 3 vibes from him. And as I watched the movie, I'm like, oh, whoa, 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 wait a second. I know why you're seeing all these different types. And I know why he's coming off kind of 8-ish, but he doesn't have that same like innate strength that the 8 has. The 8 just does it. Like, again, they're part of the gut triad. They just act from their gut. And I say this all the time. The eights do not back down from a challenge. And they're the first ones to like kind of put themselves up for the challenge. And we don't really see that as much with Peter. What we see from Peter is more of a defensive style of that. And so when they said the 2 and the 3 were other types they were considering for him, it started to piece together for me. But it wasn't until seeing the second movie, or seeing the second movie again, I should say, because I've watched these movies before, but seeing it again and being like, I know why you're getting that. It's because Peter is a counterphobic 6. And I say that because, to be honest, what we see from him is he's trying to be the leader, and he's kind of been put in the situation of becoming the father figure of the family at such a young age. And so he's wanting to be a good example. He's wanting to lead his siblings. He's wanting to be that protector for them. But he's also a little bit like crapping his pants at times. Like, you can see that he's very much like, I don't know. Like, I want to put up a good front, but you can see deep down that he is nervous. And what we see from him is more of that counterphobic 6 thing of wanting to face the fear before it gets to him. And that way you're kind of defeating it before it can even scare you. However, the other issue with that is 6s have a fear of fear itself. And so you go through this whole process, especially as a counterphobic 6. It is so hard to explain. And if you've never listened to the podcast before, I am a counterphobic 6. So that's why I'm like identifying with it. And I think another thing that really says type 6 versus type 8 to me when it comes to Peter is the fact that he is equally calm and reactive. We see him get reactive when people challenge his opinion on things, or when people try and, I guess, say that he doesn't know what he's doing. He's very quick to be like, excuse me, but he doesn't have the same passion that the 8 would have in that situation. And so that's how you can identify it. The other thing, he is able to admit weakness in front of other people. Now, remember, the 8, that is a fear of theirs. They are afraid of appearing weak. And that's something that they don't want to expose to people, because they feel like if I expose my weakness, then they kind of have a spot to come in and get me. Peter, though, we can see in the fight scene in the second movie, or I'm sorry, the scene where he's fighting Caspian's uncle, because there's tons of fight scenes, but that one in particular, he's quick to say, I'm hurt. Like, this is dislocated. I'm not in a good way. But he still keeps going out there, and he doesn't try and automatically put up a front like, I'm going to just pretend that I have it together in order to not let other people worry. He's like, oh man, this isn't going great for me. And I don't know what's going to happen. And so that's where we can see that he really is in a healthy space, because he's able to be like, yeah, this isn't the greatest situation right now, but I'm going to keep going out there and doing the best that I can because I want to help these people. And that's what you're going to see from the 6, the counterphobic 6, excuse me, because they are wanting that support system and also wanting to face their fear. And so by telling them, yeah, I'm really struggling right now, other people can rally around you and say, we're here with you. We got you. You can do this. And I think he needed a little bit of that. And the fact that he wasn't able to kill Caspian's uncle when the time came and actually back down from it, I don't think an 8 in that heightened situation would have backed down. I think they would have just finished him off. And again, that takes a certain amount of head type thinking versus gut type action, because remember, when the gut types feel something, they do go for it. And I think as a 6, he's using his head a little bit more and thinking about things before he goes through with them. And that's where we see him acting more out of that than just like pure gut. That being said, I do think that he probably has an 8 in his tri-type, and I actually put his tri-type down as a 6, 8, 2. Now, I chose the 2 from the heart triad because I really do think he cares, and he's someone that wants to be there for everyone, and he really does want to protect his siblings. He wants to be a role model and be the great person that they can count on and have in their lives. And they know that he's a steady, stable person that's going to, I guess, fill in the role that they've lost due to their father being away at war. And so he lives up to that, and he's able to draw from that to care and helpfulness and gentleness. And I think he does have a really nice, calm demeanor most of the time. And when he gets riled up, it's always out of more of people bugging him for an extended period of time. And then he's like, you know what? And so that's where, again, it feels more 6 to me than it feels 8. And with the 8 and the 2 in the tri-type, I think it makes a lot of sense for him. And I think he's got a really nice balance. And oh, let me just talk about this. The reason that I was like, oh, okay, yes, he's a 6. And that's why you're getting the 8, the 3, and the 2. 6s are commonly mistyped for 8s, 3s, and 2s, because the self-preserving 6 comes across very 2-ish. In fact, a lot of people mistype as a 2 when they're actually a self-preserving 6. The counterphobic 6 mistypes as an 8 because both of them are very similar in the way they go about things. However, the core motivation is very different. And then again, 6 has a connection to 3. 6 goes to 3 in stress. So again, I think Peter has the core type of a counterphobic 6, and I think his tritype is a 682. And last but not least, we have to talk about Caspian. So obviously, he's a main player in movies 2 and 3. But I was like really struggling when it was coming to his type because I felt like he just didn't really have like a whole lot of emotion. He seemed to be very reserved. And the only time that you saw him get riled up was really when it had all come to a head. And finally, he snaps and he just yells at Peter. And that for me, I was like, I think he's a 9. I think he's very steady and calm and doesn't want to rock the boat, but he also wants to do what's right because remember, the gut types are very justice oriented. And I do think that he's a 9 wing 1. And that's where a lot of that sense of justice and wanting to do what's right and denying his own people in order to pick up what's right. That feels very 1 to me, but he does not have the 1 spirit. I think that he really does have that type 9. Like I said, he's so calm and sensible, but he also has that 1. So he wants to jump into action, but that's not where he comes out of all the time. I really do think that he has that 9 and a really strong 1 wing that, really helps him to be able to carry through what's right. And even though it's uncomfortable or could rock the boat, I think he's like, you know what, this is worth it. It's worth disturbing the peace in order to do what's right and save people. And that's where you're going to see that from that 9 wing 1, because remember, the 1 wants to always uphold what's right, good, and just. And they'll stop at nothing to do that. And so that's where he finally realizes, I've had enough. I can't stay here with you people. I have to go because what you're doing is wrong and I can't be part of it anymore. And so that's how the 9 wing 1 really fights. They're able to be that calming force of justice because remember, the 8 and the 1 are going to be more intense, whereas the 9, they are after peace. And so everything they do, even though it is very impactful and awesome, it comes from that calm place. And so I would argue that maybe it's even more impactful because they're able to argue their side from a very gentle place. Whereas the 8 can be very in your face and intense, which we love. And the 1 can be very facts oriented and also intense in a different way. And the 9 is like the perfect mix. They're like, I can argue my point. I can bring everything to the table in the way that it needs to be said in order to reach the most people and impact. And so that's what we love about the 9. And I think it's really interesting. I would have loved to have seen like him and Susan, what that would have looked like if they would have stayed in Narnia in the second movie, because a 9 and a 5 is a very interesting pairing. They're both withdrawing types. And I think they probably would have really met in that 8 space because remember, 5 goes to 8 and 9 has an 8 wing. I think that's where they would have met. And I think they would have had some really cool adventures. And I think they would have been a really good balance for each other because when things are crazy, they both know how to withdraw and how to calm down together. And I think that would actually make for a really good relationship because there wouldn't be friction of like, I want to withdraw and I want to talk about it. They both would have the same method of chilling out, letting it settle, and then coming back together and talking things out or just being there for each other. But anyways, that's it for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed. If you're a Narnia fan, be sure and rate this episode, give it 5 stars, and subscribe for more. We have a couple more episodes of the summer throwback series, and then we're moving on. But be sure and check out my Instagram at Hey It's Liv James because I have so many fun Narnia pictures on there in today's post for you. And as always, check back for a new episode on Tuesday. We upload every Tuesday and Friday. All right, see you next time. Bye.